because I think we'll have some people who might want it. So again, welcome to the Key to Effective Communication workshop. In today's workshop, we are going to cover, well, first, we know that a lot of you want to get to know more people in the HP community. So we're going to do some get to know your community. So we'll do that in breakout rooms with peer mentors. Then we'll move into different types of communication, then virtual communication, and then also kind of some guides and tips to having difficult conversations during COVID. Some of you might follow our HP Instagram. Shout out to our Instagram team and our social media team for handling all of that. So you might see some of our resources on there. I'm just gonna go over a couple of them just in case you haven't seen them yet. So, any questions? No, we're looking good. Awesome, cool. All right, so what we'll do in breakout rooms, and I'm gonna go ahead and get those started, is we'll just have some breakout rooms where we'll share our name, our major, what you took for Jan Term. I know Jan Term can be really fun, so I'd love to hear, and I'm sure your peers would like to hear what you did during Jan Term. And then you can pick to answer one of the following prompts. You can either answer, my friends would describe me as blank, or I wouldn't be caught dead without blank. And obviously, don't just answer the question, explain yourself. I'm sure that would be helpful for the people in your breakout rooms. So I'll go ahead and start those breakout rooms. There's about 20 of us. So we'll have about 5 breakout rooms with 4 in each. And I'll go ahead and open those now, and I'll bring you back. We'll have about 5 minutes in breakout room, so we'll come back around 1:10. Ashley, do you have a breakout room? Did I assign you?
No, I don't. I didn't pop up. I can see it.
Okay, let's see. What the heck? And you've been here the whole time. That's so weird. Okay, that's okay. If you want to stay in here, I don't know how to add you to a breakout room.
I don't know either. Diego, did you decline? Sorry?
It's showing on Ashley's name that she's the host.
Oh, because I was in my office hours here. Let me make you host.
Switch Jazz to host, and then
yeah, I'll make her host. Yeah, it's because I was.
I see. Okay, Ashley, okay. I'm gonna.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. No worries. I'm gonna assign you to the room with Emily, Anahi, and Santos.
Okay, great. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, Shar.
Hi.
I'm gonna go ahead and pause recording.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're just gonna wait for all those breakout rooms to close. Waiting for everyone. Let's see. Okay, we got about 10 more seconds. Okay, so I think everyone has made their way back. Hi, y'all, welcome. I hope you had some good conversations with your peers. Would anyone like to share out something that they heard in their breakout rooms or that they shared? If not, we can keep on moving on. No? Okay, that's totally fine. All right, let's keep on going. So the next thing we're gonna do, I guess it's kind of our first thing we're gonna do, is we're gonna talk about miscommunication. And I think it's really important that in order to be an effective communicator, it's important to understand where miscommunication comes from. And so we're going to listen to this video. It's only about 1.5 minutes, super brief, and then we'll kind of talk about it and then keep on going.
Whether it's at work, in a relationship, or just your everyday life, miscommunication can happen pretty easily. And that's okay. Let's take a look at a couple different reasons for why it happens and how you can deal with them. One big reason is not fully listening. We put a lot of focus on talking, but listening can be just as significant. It's important that both parties want to listen to each other and give their full attention. This is the difference between listening and just hearing. Try asking yourself, am I focused on what they're saying, or am I focused on what I'm going to say next? Being a good listener allows you to be more receptive and understanding. Lack of empathy is another reason for miscommunication. Empathy is the ability to understand another person's thoughts and feelings. This may come naturally to some, but it can be difficult for others. If you're willing to be open, you can really hear the other person and see where they're coming from. In doing so, it's good to validate others' feelings as well. This will make you both more comfortable and make communicating easier. Next time, ask yourself, why might this person feel this way? Or how would I feel if I was in their situation? Through a mix of active listening and empathy, it's possible to reach agreements more easily, discuss opposing viewpoints, and turn miscommunication into effective communication.
Cool. So that was just kind of a short video. And again, like I think I mentioned this in the beginning of our workshop, is that kind of just understanding that given our context being in a pandemic and doing distance learning, we have to think about communication with these extra layers of understanding, and understanding that communication during this time is extremely difficult, whether it's through a computer or having difficult conversations. We need to practice empathy and active listening, which we'll go over later on in this workshop, and just being more thoughtful and clear during this time. Does anyone have any aha moments from this video or a takeaway? You can drop those in the chat, maybe just share out with your peers, and we'll keep on going. Okay, let's see, let's go on.
Whether it's at work,
This isn't what I
in a
want.
relation.
There we go. Not going to make you watch it over again. Okay, so at this point in the workshop, I want us to think about really quickly, maybe take like 30 seconds to think about a situation where communication is really important. And the purpose of this is to maybe think of one specific scenario where you're thinking like, I need to have a difficult conversation with someone, and just have it in the back of your mind so you can engage in the material. You can either private message me an idea that you might have, or just think about it for the next 30 seconds. Awesome. I see some private messages in the chat. So someone said a job interview, relationships with a significant other, setting boundaries with different relationships in a relationship. So yeah, I hear you all. Like I have experienced all of those things, a job interview, talking with a specific individual. Like these are really thoughtful answers, because these are things that you have to thoughtfully plan out. So I really appreciate these answers in the chat. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and get started with the content of this workshop. And so the first thing we want to talk about is verbal communication. You all experience this on a daily basis. We all communicate, we all communicate differently, but we all can use verbal communication. So verbal communication, just to kind of have a general understanding, is when two individuals communicate through speaking, and we communicate this way with our bosses, our employees, customers, or clients at work. And if you see over here at the bottom left, I included this little GIF from a favorite childhood movie of mine from The Cat in the Hat, where he's saying, well, sure, he can talk, but is he really saying anything? And so this is kind of where we want to come at with verbal communications, is you can say a bunch of things, but are you really saying anything? Is the person that is on the other end of this conversation, are they truly getting what you have to say? And so another understanding that I want to ground this in is communication is a two-way process. It involves both how we send out communication and also how we receive messages from the person we're communicating with. And like decoding what they have to say all at once. And so that can be really overwhelming sometimes, but it's important to understand that the intended recipients of your message won't be able to understand what you're trying to say if you don't know what you're trying to say, if that makes sense. And so that's where miscommunication comes from. So I'm going to go into some tips that I have to share out some verbal ways to improve verbal communication. And if anyone has any additional tips, I'd love to hear from the HP community what has worked for y'all in improving your verbal communication. And I see some people are taking some notes. That's really awesome. I will also be sharing this slide at the end via email. So make sure, again, to fill out that Google form just so I can send that out to all of you. So we'll move into some tips that I have for verbal communication. The first tip, and they're kind of interconnected, I put be direct and to be prepared. And so questions that you can ask yourself when you're wanting to be direct with someone is, what am I hoping to achieve from this conversation? It's always nice to have a purpose or a goal that you have going into the conversation. And this can look like planning it out. So I know someone messaged me in the chat that planning out conversations is super important. And this can look like writing it down. Maybe you want to have a mock conversation, maybe with a peer mentor or a coach or someone that you trust. Just so you can really get all that you want to say out, and then also get feedback on what you might want to say, especially with these really difficult conversations. Something I like to do, I like to make bullet points, just like I'm obviously not going to bring, and this is okay too, I'm not going to bring my bullet points to the conversation, but it's something that I can re-look over if I'm having trouble. Another thing that I want to talk about is tone. And so tone is how you say something, and that is also super important. It can set the tone, and excuse my repetitiveness, I don't really know how else I can say it. It can set the tone and feeling of the conversation that you're having and how someone interprets your conversation. And so when I think of tone, I think about, am I going into this conversation really heated or upset? I don't want the person receiving that information to know that I am heated or upset and overly emotional about this conversation. I want them to know that I'm being really thoughtful about this conversation instead of letting my emotions get the better of what I want to say. And so tone is really important. And we'll talk more about this later as well. Another tip that I have is to check in with your listener. And I think this is something that's super underrated in conversations, is that you can be saying something, but we're all unique individuals, and how we interpret information can be different because we all come from different experiences, different backgrounds. So being aware of your personal and perceptual filters is really important. So checking in with the other person that you're having the conversation with is like, I just said all this information. Is this making sense? Do you have any comments before I keep on going? And I think like it may seem really unnatural, but in reality, I don't think we do this enough. And I think it really does help the other person in the conversation feeling a part of it instead of being talked at. I'm a future teacher, and I know exactly what it feels like to, one, be talked at, and to talk at someone. And so I think when you're checking in with your listener, is really important because they feel a part of the conversation. What questions do we have? Do we have any questions from anyone? Are there also, another question that I have is, what are some ways that you all have improved your verbal communication or really want to improve your verbal communication? You can send those in the chat. Either direct message me or to share out with your peers. I'd love to hear what you all have to say.
I agree with the part about tone matters because I think that's something I have to work on too personally because like you said, if you're sad or angry, you can tell right away through someone's tone. And so I think that's important for me as a self-improvement to learn how to control my tone and to focus on what I'm trying to say instead of letting my emotions talk for me.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Rita, for sharing. I think building off of what you have to say, Rita, like you're saying, like, this is something that I want to work on. I've obviously given you several tips, but even taking away one thing that you want to work on, that's going to help improve your verbal communication. I see in the chat, finishing a thought without a pause or an this is definitely, I totally agree. I have trouble with that. You might see that in this presentation, and that's totally okay. We're all working on it. I think that's a great goal. Thank you for sharing. Another one that I'm seeing in the chat is being conscious when verbally speaking is one of my goals. That's a great goal. I think I encourage everyone to have a goal leaving this workshop, and it doesn't have to be in verbal communication. We're going to talk about other steps as well. So thank you all for participating and sharing. I'll keep on going. I have another opportunity for people to share out. And this little activity is super quick, but I would love to hear, what do you think these people are communicating? So the first one is this picture right here. I'd love to hear from anyone. You can come off mute. Again, send it in the chat. What do you think this person here is communicating? I see one, annoyed, stressed. Yeah, I think those are great. And I'd love to know, oh, frustrated, tired, awesome, tired, great. And so why do you think that this person is communicating that they're tired, or what about this picture or video shows you that they're tired and frustrated? You're killing me, Smalls. Yeah, exactly. So what about this video is telling you that? Can anyone come off mute or send in the chat? Body language. Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, body language. Santos says that he gives the same response. So recognizing, like mirroring, like, yeah, I also have this response to situation. Yeah, that's great. What about number two? What is the person in number two? What are they communicating out to us? I love this GIF. It's something I do with my hands all the time. So what is number two communicating? Passion. Ooh, that's a good one. Excitement, emphasis. Great. And I think the same thing, like the body language, joy. Awesome. Thank you, Angela, for sharing. Joy is something that this person is communicating. Great. And then this last one. What is this last one? This one's a little tough, but because I don't know exactly, but I'm just making assumptions. So what about this number three down here at the bottom? Someone in direct message me, excuse me? Annoyed, curious. Yeah, awesome. Great. So the reason I wanted to share these three GIFs with y'all, one, I think GIFs are super interactive. Anahi says someone they don't like just walked in. I feel that. I also have that emotion on my face. So the reason that I wanted to bring up these GIFs, and it's something that you all can be proud of, is that you're recognizing these nonverbal communications. Like, none of these people are speaking. There are no words attached to this GIF. So you all have the skills to recognize nonverbal communication. And I think this is something that we can continue to build on. So thanks for all of these awesome messages in the chat. We'll keep on going. So nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication includes some of the things that you all were pointing out. Can be facial expressions. It can be tone. So again, what we were talking about, the pitch of your voice or gesture. So that number two, being really expressive with their gestures and body language. And it can also be the physical distance that you are between you and the person that you're wanting to communicate with. I think it's important to note that interpersonal communication is much more than just words that we say. It's also about, and it's about how we convey the information, which is something that we've already been talking about. And so it's also important to note that nonverbal communication can be conscious. So I'm consciously wanting to be really expressive during this workshop because I think it's a great conversation that we're having. But I also could unconsciously be using my hands because I'm just used to using my hands when I talk. And they also can complicate things. I think the way that we interpret nonverbal communication, so someone's expression, can complicate the message that we're either conveying or receiving. Another thing to know, oh, actually, no, that's all that I had to say about this slide. I would love to hear from anyone who can share about a situation where someone's nonverbal communication set the tone of the conversation. So what did they do? How did you feel? And you can, if you don't feel comfortable, again, sharing this out loud, feel free to message me in the chat and I could read some of the stuff out. But I'd love to know, yeah, just where, like, what is a situation where someone's nonverbal communication set the tone of the conversation? And how did you feel about it?
For me, there was one point I was working in retail, and a customer wasn't being serviced properly, so they were really frustrated, and there was a language barrier as well. But I just entered the conversation with a smile, and I tried to ease their anxious feelings, and then luckily I could bridge that language barrier, so they really calmed down immediately, and then we went from there. So I think just being friendly in a respectable way is important.
Definitely. Thanks, Victor, for sharing. I think you bring up a really great point, is that you can meet someone's nonverbal communication that is either stressed or annoyed or upset with your own, like setting the tone of the conversation of how you show up in the conversation. So I think that's a really great point. Thanks, Victor. I also see someone in the chat saying that in a situation where someone's constantly looking away, it might portray that they are bored. And yeah, so these are all, we can all pick up on these cues that other people give us. It's about how we respond to them and interact with them, is that's what's really important. So I'm gonna keep on going. Again, if you're taking notes, I will again share this out just so you have it with you. And so I wanna go into a true or false. And this is gonna get us to think deeper about nonverbal communication. So this first one here down at the bottom left, I'd love to know, true or false, people from different cultures have different tolerance for physical distance between each other. And you can send that in the chat to everyone. I'd love to see true. I'm seeing a bunch of trues. Awesome. Yeah. So we're all kind of in agreement. This is true. Yeah. And so some context behind this true or false question is that I was doing some research and found that culture can really impact how you non-verbally communicate. And so for example, in Middle Eastern culture, and again, I'm not someone who's part of this culture. This is something that I've read. And if you are, I'd love to hear more information. But according to some of the research that I was doing, Middle Eastern culture, people like to be near each other and talk in close proximity with each other. Whereas people in European or American cultures might not have as much acceptance to the breach of physical distance that you have to another person. So this is just something to know. It's not something to overthink, but to be conscious of. And I think if anything, if you are very curious about how this other person is going to interpret your physical distance between them, it's okay to ask and just frame it in a sense of like, I want to respect your space. And so is it okay if I come closer to you while we're having this conversation, etc.? Like, I think that's totally fine to just straight up ask and just be respectful. The second one, true or false, looking directly in someone's eyes when speaking and is a universal sign of respect. True or false? Ooh, I'm seeing a lot of trues. Okay, great. So I'm excited to talk about this one. This one is actually false. So again, when I was doing a lot of research, a lot of Western cultures consider eye contact to be a really good gesture. And I think that that speaks to all of the experiences that we've had. But again, in other cultures, and this might be different based on family and how you were raised, but apparently Asian cultures, Hispanic cultures, it may not be a good expression and might sometimes consider it rude or offensive. Again, I'm a part of the Asian culture and my family was never like that, but I think it's just important to note that maybe like they're not looking directly at me because they're nervous or may think it's offensive. So sometimes it's about how your gut feels about the situation. So that's another important note. Okay, this last one, thumbs up. The thumbs up gesture, which generally is a sign of approval in English-speaking countries, is considered offensive in other countries, including Greece, Italy, and parts of the Middle East. True or false? Ooh, okay, I see some false. True. Awesome. Yeah. So thanks for those of you who are replying in the chat. It is true. So I didn't know this. I love to use thumbs up, and this is not to say that you shouldn't, but I'm someone who uses it constantly. I also think it's kind of telling to people who maybe created Zoom. Zoom has the thumbs up button and may not be conscious about how this might be offensive in other cultures. So just some fun facts. And also, again, just bringing it back to nonverbal communication can differ in cultures. And so just being conscious of that is a great step towards improving your nonverbal communication. Let's keep on going. So I have some tips here, obviously not as many as the verbal communication, but still really important. The first one I have here is keeping comfortable eye contact. And this is something like we just talked about, is you don't have to avoid eye contact, but do avoid staring at someone the whole time. It might make them nervous. It's important to meet someone's gaze. And so kind of this has to do with mirroring the person that you're having communication with. And it shows that you're interested in the conversation, and that your focus is on them. And this goes back to what one of our community members said in the chat, that when someone was looking away from when I was talking with them, I thought they were bored of the conversation. That's not good. So that's one thing to notice. The second one is to stay on the same level as the person you're talking to. As a future teacher, this is something that I'm really conscious about, especially going into teaching with little kids. Being on the same level as them. So if my kid is standing and they're really like, they're kids, they're tiny. And so I have to sometimes kneel down so I'm at the same level as them. And this can happen with your conversations with children or with someone that you're talking to. Let's say you're having a conversation and someone is sitting down. You can sit down next to them. It's better to be on the same level because it appears less threatening and can make someone feel more comfortable. And this is something that I think is totally underrated. Just being on the same level as someone. So that's one of them. Lastly, emotional awareness is key. So in order to accurately read others, including emotions and feeling their unspoken messages that they're sending, it's important to be emotionally aware. So aware of how what you're saying might impact them is really important. This also creates trust in a relationship by sending nonverbal signs that match up with your words. So again, like you can meet like being comforting, just like Victor was talking about, just meeting someone where they might be receiving the conversation. I think also another thing to know is that a lot of us can feel really disconnected from our emotions, especially strong emotions like feeling sad or angry. I know like there have been some situations where I'm in a conversation with my roommate and I'm already annoyed about something else, and I might I think a lot of people hear this word being said, disassociate, where I'm just like, I'm too overwhelmed with my own emotions and I disassociate. And that's something I'm super upfront with my roommate of like, hey, I had a really bad day. And if I'm not fully communicating, let me know. So those are something that I would want you all to take away from this. I also, when I share these slides, on this slide particularly, there is an emotional intelligence toolkit. I didn't include it because it's a lot of information, but if you're someone who really wants to work on your emotional intelligence, so being self-aware, just understanding your emotions, please feel free to click on that emotional intelligence toolkit because I found it really helpful as someone who wants to be really authentic and purposeful when communicating with others. That's something that I would definitely use. Okay, do we have any questions? That's a lot of information I just threw at you. No? Okay, great. That's good. So again, these are a lot of things that I'm throwing at you. If you could just take one of them away, think about what that might be. Keep that with you as we continue forward. All right, another huge thing that is kind of like I've been talking about but haven't named is active listening. Active listening techniques can help you truly understand what a person is saying in the conversations or meetings that you're having. So what does active listening look like? So active listening looks like you're maintaining eye contact. That's something we've been talking about. Nodding in response. So this nonverbal communication, you don't always have to say something back to another person, but just reaffirming that you're listening to them is really helpful. And this can look like mirroring the speaker when you're in the conversation to show interest, or allowing the speaker, this is something that I've talked about with my roommate, is allowing the speaker to complete their thoughts, their entire thoughts. So I think something that we have all experienced, and this might be somewhere like seminar, where you're in a conversation and you're hearing someone say something and you automatically think of a response, but then you miss half of what they're saying. So being conscious of that and being like, okay, I'm going to listen first before I respond is really important. On the side over here, I've included what active listening can do. So building trust and establishing rapport when you're in a conversation. You can demonstrate concern. I really like this bullet point in particular. So brief verbal affirmations, these are lifesavers. So saying like, I see, like I hear you, or thank you. And I think those are really important, where you're not fully responding with complete thought, but just affirming them, like I'm listening to you and I'm still in this conversation with you. Someone asked me in the chat, where can we find the toolkit? It's going to be in these slides, just in the notes. So you'll see like I have some talking notes. It's going to be linked down there, and I'll make sure that it's very clear. And I'll also link it in the email when I send it out to all of y'all. So just again, active listening will help redirect your focus when you're going into a conversation with your personal relationships or a future employer. And this technique also can help you reduce your nervousness. I know that I'm someone who gets really nervous before a conversation, but if I tell myself, you know what, like I don't have to put so much pressure on the response that I have, but more of really listening. And when you shift your mindset to that, you really stop and think about like, okay, I don't have to have a response to what they're saying or know what exactly to say to them in that moment. But if I'm giving them my full attention and being authentic about that, that can be really helpful. So that is my tidbit on active listening. We have a few more slides. I want to be conscious of time. We have about 20 more minutes. We'll probably end early for those of you who might be wondering. Okay, so now we're gonna go into virtual communication, and I think I don't have a whole lot on this because this is something that you are all living in. It's something that I am living in. And so what does virtual communication look like? It looks like Zoom. Look, I'm giving this presentation to all of you who use Zoom, and this is probably what your classes look like. It can also be email or text, emailing a professor, texting your friends who might be down the hall from you, but you can't see them. Or phone calls. That's something that we've obviously had for a while now, but is really important for virtual communication. So I wanted to talk about virtual communication in a sense of like, you have the tools already to virtually communicate because a lot of them are really transferable. So in our toolbox, you know that you can, let's say you don't want to be distracting during a conversation. I know I have a lot going on in my background, but sometimes I'll throw up a virtual background so it's less distracting when I'm having a conversation with someone via Zoom. You can, just so your conversation goes smoothly, you can verify Zoom meetings and links before you have to join them. I know I test out my Zoom links every time someone sends me one, just so I make sure that it's the right one. Another thing is obviously checking your audio before Zoom, and then keeping your mic on mute when you're either in a distracting place. You can turn your mic on mute, or when someone else is talking. So some things that I want to reframe in our toolbox is that even though we are online and virtual, you need to be aware of your body language, your posture, your eye contact, because it's really important. And in a virtual space, those I think I can argue are even more important than when you're not in a virtual space, because the way someone is receiving your attentiveness in the conversation or on Zoom is really important, because you can't communicate that. When I join a class, I can't communicate that I'm excited to be there, but I can turn on my camera if it's possible. Again, I'm totally understanding of technical issues. So that goes to my second bullet point, is communicating technical and internet issues with your professors. I want to say, like, it is an equity issue of, like, if you can't turn on your camera, it's an issue of equity, and that's something that you should definitely bring up to your professor. This is also something that I've talked to Janae about, so our director. I'll be putting out a toolkit for communicating these technical issues with your professors, because I know it can be really difficult. I have a hard time doing it sometimes too. So just look out for that. It'll probably be posted on our Instagram or sent out to you in our flyer. I also think context of that needs reframing is that it's okay to take breaks when you're on Zoom. I know I just said, like, you should have your camera on, but it's okay to just say, like, hello, like, send a message to your professor, like, hi, I know I'm usually have my camera on, but I wanted to let you know today, like, I'm not feeling well, I have a headache. Those are all okay too, and to be direct and honest during those circumstances. So those are just some reframing that I would like to just talk about and share out with all of you. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep on going. Unless you have any questions, again, you can message me in the chat. So the resources for difficult conversations, I didn't have a whole lot on this slide, because I think I'd love to hear, and you can again send this in the chat, what has been helpful for you? I know, like, peer mentors might have a lot to say on this because they're having difficult conversations all the time. But I think in our context, we can impact the type of conversations we have with our loved ones in our community when we think about how it's already worked or how it hasn't worked. So if anyone would like to share those in the chat, some factors that I like to keep in mind, and keep in mind more because we are in this context, is to lead with empathy. This is something that we were talking about in the beginning in that video of miscommunication, leading with empathy, and like just showing your understanding for, yeah, I understand that it is COVID and we are all sick of being inside, but I really need to have this conversation with you because I'm worried for both of our health, etc. And I know that that can be a really difficult conversation to have. Another thing that I want to remind all of you is that HB staff is here to help you with all these conversations. I need to sometimes check in with Janae or with Shar and say, I don't know how to have this conversation. Can you help me? So when you meet with your coach or with your peer mentor, ask them for help. You know, we've put out a lot of resources for all of you, but those are just some things that I want to remind you. And then be direct and use specific examples. So in some of the resources that I shared, HB has shared, we use facts. So like if you're having a conversation with your family member about COVID, it's like, hey, this is what the CDC is saying. And I'm not saying this to put you down or to say that you don't understand this, but it's just helpful for me to come back to and have a direct and specific example. And this is also going back to planning out your conversations. They're super, super important. I know I didn't have a lot of information on this slide, but do we have any questions or want to talk about some more questions, or yeah, some more questions that you have in regards to some of these difficult conversations that you might be having? No? Okay, cool. I'll just keep, this is going to be our last slide of the day. Hold on one second. So again, I just wanted to share out these resources. They are on our Instagram. And if someone could drop what our Instagram name is in the chat, I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's somewhere you can look for, as well as if you go on Slack, we've posted a resource and I'll repost it today where we can link some of these resources where I specifically name specific conversations that you'll have. So whether it's a family member isn't following the guidelines or you need to communicate with your household, thanks Ashley, you need to communicate with your household or with someone down the hall about what it looks like now that you're in distance learning, or your roommate. I don't exactly know the housing situation, but those are things that I specifically name in these resources and have tips and scripts that you can use. So those are there for you, as well as any resources that I've listed in this slideshow in particular. So that is the end of our workshop. I want to thank all of you for coming and invite you to ask any questions. And if you don't have any, I wish you well on your day, and feel free to stay back. I'll be here till 2 o'clock. So if you want to have a more individual conversation, I'd love to have that. Thanks PMs for all the love. I love that. So yeah, everyone have a great day. I will see you all later. You're so welcome. Thanks for coming. Okay, so we have Victor and Leonardo. I see that you're still here. Do you have any questions that I can answer, or peer mentors? What's up?
Hi, Jazzy.
Hi, Victor.
I forget. It's kind of in the beginning of the presentation. You spoke about the nonverbal
Mm-hmm.
communication. Was there a toolkit or any resources? that you
Yeah.
could
So,
send my way?
nonverbal communication.
Or
So
was it
I do.
nonverbal or the emotions? Something to do with the emotions.
Okay, let's look. You're welcome, Leonardo. Oh, he left. Okay. Let's look. So I do have a toolkit in here that talks about emotional intelligence, and I'll share that with you now. I'm also gonna send it in an email.
Okay.
But here it is for you if you want to look at it now beforehand. And I'm gonna list all of the resources at the end of my presentation before I send it out, so you can look through them and just kind of see where I got all my information from. And you have my number. You don't feel shy to text me. I'm so willing to help with anything.
Okay, great.
Okay, cool. Does that answer all your questions, Victor?
Yes, thank you. You're doing a great job. Thank you
Oh,
very much.
Thanks, Victor. See you later, bud.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, you too. Bye. All right, peer mentors, you all are free to go. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to come to you some of your HP Nexuses. I know the last one, no one came, but I'm excited to come to future ones. I'm so sorry that happened, and also want to validate all the work you're doing. Y'all are doing great.
Bye, Jackie. Thank you. Good job.
Thanks. See y'all later. Is anyone staying on for office hours?
I am.
Okay, so I'm just gonna leave the meeting because it says end meeting and I don't want to do that. So
Oh
I'm
yeah,
gonna-
you can just leave. It's okay.
I'm gonna also stop the recording.
Oh right.